You know how it is, you open up the news, and it's just this constant flood of headlines, right? A political decision over here, a human interest story over there. It can feel kind of impossible to see how it all fits together, to really get the bigger picture.
So, how do we piece it all together? How does a decision made in a Capitol building ripple out and affect people thousands of miles away? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to take some of today's biggest headlines and see if we can connect those dots. All right, let's start at the very top. We're talking about the big decisions, the ones made in the halls of power that really set the wheels in motion for everything else. First up, and this one's a big symbolic shift happening in the United States. President Trump has signed an executive order to rebrand the Department of Defense back to what it was called before 1947, the Department of War. Now, this isn't just about changing a sign on a building. It's a really powerful statement about the military's role today, and it definitely makes you stop and think about how we view its history.
So, while one part of the government is making this symbolic move, another branch, the judiciary, is making a decision that has this absolutely massive, real world impact on people's lives. A federal judge just blocked an attempt to end protections for over 1 million migrants here in the U.S. So, here's the breakdown. The ruling came from Judge Edward Chen. He found that the effort by the DHS Secretary, Kristi Noem, to end the Temporary Protected Status Program, or TPS, was unlawful. He basically ruled she just didn't have the authority to do it, which provides a crucial, even if it's temporary, lifeline for folks from Haiti and Venezuela. And back in Washington, the pressure is really on. The U.S. government is staring down a September 30th deadline to get a new funding deal passed. With only 14 legislative days left on the calendar and not a lot of progress to show for it, the risk of a government shutdown is getting very, very real. And that, of course, could bring all sorts of services to a grinding halt for millions of people. Okay, let's hop over to the international stage. In India, Prime Minister Modi is welcoming good relations with the U.S., but he's also drawing a really firm line in the sand. The government has made it crystal clear. It will not agree to any trade deals that are going to hurt its own farmers. The message is pretty simple. Hey, we're all for good relations, but not at any cost. All right, so we've seen all these high-level decisions, right? But what does it all mean on the ground? How does this stuff actually affect real people in their day-to-day lives? Well, this is where the rubber meets the road. And wow, right here you can see that chain reaction in some pretty devastating numbers. A $50 million cut in US aid to Zambia, which was triggered by theft, is having a catastrophic effect on its HIV response. The result? You've got drug shortages and a staggering 30% drop in both new diagnoses and in new patients starting life-saving therapy. We're talking about thousands of lives that are now at risk. At the same time, a natural disaster is creating its own heartbreaking consequences. Heavy monsoon rains are just wreaking havoc across northern India. You've got the Yamuna River flooding parts of Delhi, deadly landslides in Kulu, and widespread flooding hitting Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. And just tragically, the state of Himachal alone has already recorded 366 deaths. But you know, not every story about human impact is about a current tragedy. This is about justice, a century in the making. The Harlem Hellfighters, an all-black regiment, served with absolutely legendary distinction in World War I. They fought for a country that, for decades, just failed to properly recognize their incredible bravery. Well, today, that long, long wait is finally over. And think back to that Department of War we just talked about. It was soldiers exactly like the Hellfighters who defined its legacy. The honor was made official by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and members of Congress, who presented the Congressional Gold Medal. It's just a really powerful moment, you know? A decision from the top that finally rights a huge historical wrong. So where does this all leave us? Not every thread is tied up in a neat bow, right? A lot of these stories are still unfolding. So let's take a look at what we should be watching in the coming days. And now for a story playing out right now in a totally different arena. The world of sports. After a tough 4-set victory, Jannik Sinner has battled his way into the U.S. Open final. He's up against Carlos Alcaraz, and he's not just going for a repeat title, he's chasing his 5th major trophy. This is one story that's going to have a winner very, very soon. But some of these other huge stories, they're still totally up in the air. That clock is still ticking on U.S. government funding. The trade talks between the U.S. and India are still going on. And, most critically, that health crisis in Zambia is a long way from being solved. These are the big ones to keep on your radar.
So, there you have it. From a name change at the Pentagon that makes us look at the past to a life or death health crisis happening right now in Zambia. From a century-old wrong finally being made right to a tennis final that's still to be played, you can see how a single day is this incredible web of policy, people, and history. It all connects. So the only question left is, which story will you follow?